Hi, my name is Michael Torres, and I'm doing a report on the Great Chicago Fire. The Great Chicago Fire burned from Sunday, October 8th to early Tuesday, October 10th, 1871, killing hundreds and destroying about 4 square miles in Chicago, Illinois. On Sunday, October 8th, 1871, Chicago was swept under a devastating fire which burned on for 2 days, ravaging the city with its destructive spread. The fire marks a time in Chicago's history of fear and loss, but it is also duly noted that after the fire, the rebuilding that occurred became a catalyst for the Chicago's future. After the rebuilding, Chicago became one of the most populated and economically driven American cities. The fire, in retrospect, was a needed encouragement that bonded the Chicago citizens together and started a fervor for the reconstruction of their beloved city. The Chicago Fire's origin has created various fake tales, embellishing accounts from citizens, but the established cause of the fire started in a barn. On October 8th, on 9 p.m., in a small shed that was situated near Devoken Street, alit with flames. The person, or shall we say animal, that started it was a cow owned by Patrick O'Leary, who kicked a lantern over, quickly spreading around in the flammable barn. Though Michael Ahern, a writer at the Chicago's Republican, would later admit that the story was not true, so that the only true part of the account was that it started near Devoken Street. The fire spread was aided by the large wooden buildings that filled Chicago, making for a perfect tinder. Adding to this, a drought was happening during this time and strong northeastern winds. The fire was greatly strengthened and could not be staunched. A significant segment of the fire spread was when it consumed a tall church west of Chicago River. The fire spread thanks to firewood stretching across the south branch of the river. Adding to the fuel, there were ships lining the river, elevated wooden planks, and large wooden warehouses side by side. Essentially, the fire had everything going for it: the wind, the dryness, and the wood found everywhere. With the blaze growing ever stronger and the heat amosing, the top would throw kindling to other wooden buildings surrounding it, creating more blazes. Firefighters were fighting a lost battle. The fire had now become so large that even with the aid of other cities, it could not be contained. Eventually, the waterworks north of Chicago was cut off, taking away the firefighters' only weapon against the flames. During this time, the city was put under martial law. With high tension and panic rampant in the citizens, a Union general who was in the Civil War, Philip Sheridan, oversaw the coordination of military who brought order to the city. It was on Monday night, with the drizzling of rain, did the fire abate. After the destruction, the fire left in its wake revenged, smoldering ruins. In its ruin, the fire had destroyed 2,000 acres of Chicago land, 120 miles of sidewalk, 17,600 buildings, and $222 million worth in property. 90,000 of the 300,000 inhabitants of Chicago were left homeless after the fire. 125 people were killed during the fire, which is remarkably small seeing how far the span of the devastation spread. Fortunately, the nation's heart went out to the people of Chicago, and donations quickly poured in aid for the homeless. Today, in honor of Chicago's victory over the fire and perseverance, buildings such as Palmer House Hotel and a statue named Pillar of Fire depicting flames was erected in 1961. Remarkably, some buildings did survive the fire, such as the new Chicago Water Tower, which remains today as an unofficial memorial to the fire's destructive power. It was one of just 5 public buildings and 1 ordinary bungalow spared by the flames within the disaster zone. The O'Leary Home and Holy Family Church, the Roman Catholic congregation of the O'Leary family, were both saved by the shifts in the wind direction that kept them outside the burnt district. Almost immediately, reform began in the city's fire standards, spurred along by the efforts of leading insurance executives and fire prevention reformers such as Arthur C. Ducat. The business under his control has always been successful and profitable. One of the standard works of America's is Ducat's practice of fire underwriting, which he brought out in 1857. Before the Great Fire, he was chairman of the committee that organized and collaborated Fire Insurance Patrol of Chicago. He remained chairman of the Patrol Committee 5 years after the fire and infused into the esprit de corps and military spirit that have characterized it and brought about extension of the 5 limits to be coextensive with the city limits. An important work managed in the face of great opposition. He was chairman of the committee which framed new building law after the Great Fire, and in conjunction with Frederick Baumann, wrote the most elaborate and well-digested building law in or any other country. The Board of Local Fire Underwriters was organized on the basis of his recommendation in the capacity of the committee for that purpose, in which the position he was appointed soon after the Great Fire. And that is my report on the Great Fire of Chicago.